How's it going? So I want everyone to close your eyes and imagine, what would you do if you had 6 months off work? Would you travel to a new continent? Would you immerse yourself in a place, learn the language? Would you spend more time with loved ones? Would you visit an aging grandparent to hear their stories? Would you take care of an ailing relative or friend? Would you go see a friend who you hadn't seen, hadn't met their spouse, hadn't met their kids, and lost touch with? Or would you work on a personal project that you've always wanted to do? Yoga teacher training, photography lessons, try to write that book or start that company that you've always never had time for. My name's DiDonna. Together with my collaborator, Professor Matt Bloom, we spent the last couple of years interviewing hundreds of people across the country and the world about these extended breaks from work, commonly known as sabbaticals. And what we've learned is that not only do people want to do it, but they actually need to for their career and for their lives. And it's good for them. So with Thanksgiving season rapidly approaching, if you want some sort of controversial topic to bring up at the table that isn't religion or politics, try telling everyone you can take 6 months off work. I know that it's a privilege, and especially we as Americans struggle. In the past 2 decades, we've actually taken 5 days less paid time off than we have. Over 55% of Americans leave at least 1 day of paid time off on the table every year. So it seems impossible that you could take 6 months off. But think about it in the context of your entire life, your career. So you're about to graduate, you're going to spend, it used to be 35, then 40, now it's 50 years the average career. And truth be told, we don't know when we'll retire, if we even make it to retirement. And so in the context of a 50-year career, 6 months is just 1% of your life. I don't think anyone goes to their deathbed saying, I wish I would have worked 1% more. But there are a lot of other objections to taking sabbaticals that we hear from folks. Number one, people are worried, what will people think? What will my future employer think if I say I took time off? What will my peers, what will my family think? Number two, how can I possibly afford it? Not just the trip or whatever you do, but the lack of having a steady paycheck for a period of time. Most Americans and most people around the world don't have that privilege. And then number three, how about my responsibilities? My dependents, my spouse, my kids, my dog, my mortgage, my fantasy football league. How could I possibly leave those things out? So let's hold these aside, and we'll get to those towards the end of the talk. But first of all, what is a sabbatical? It's one of those words that people have kind of a general idea of what it is. It seems prestigious because professors get it. But there is no commonly held definition, and so from our research, we wanted to suggest one. And that is, it's extended time off from routine work for a purpose. What does extended time mean? In the interviews, what we found is that people take somewhere between 6 and 8 weeks to fully unplug from work life. After you begin to work, it becomes part of your life. You're checking your phone, you're on your laptop, and that identity that you take on with the company you work with kind of takes over. So it takes a long time to really unplug. Most people say that between 3, 6, 12 months is kind of an appropriate time to really embrace that time off from your traditional work life. Now, routine work. Does this mean that you're going to spend 6 months on the beach sipping coconuts? Probably not. There's all sorts of things that people end up doing, whether it's, like I said, trying to start a business or writing or volunteering in a local nonprofit, things that seem like work, even something like taking care of a dying parent, which is a 24/7 job. It's not that you don't work, it's that the work you do, you are choosing it. It's your decision. And then finally, for a purpose. And the reason I bring this up is because people talk about if you don't set the intention to put up a wall around your time off, the same kind of habits will come into place. You'll feel scared. It's uncomfortable to take that time off. So you'll start looking for a job, and then all of a sudden you haven't had any time to rest and recover, and you're just going on to the next job, which might be the same sort of job that you were in before that stressed you out, and it won't solve any problems to begin with. So make sure you kind of make that space. But at the end of the day, it's funny because the word sabbatical means anything you want it to. I remember when I was on mine, people would say, what are you doing? How are you getting so much time to travel? You're an American. We typically don't see those types of folks in New Zealand. And I'd say, well, I could either say I'm burnt out from work and I just blew up my relationship and I have no idea what I'm doing with my life, or I'm on sabbatical from work. So it's kind of this term that we use because it sounds good, and we don't really have a tradition in our society of taking those chunks of time off. So we talked about why someone would want to take this amount of time. It's kind of self-evident, right? There's things about life that are fun that just don't fit in this concept of working 11 and a half or 11 and a quarter months out of 12 for the rest of your life. But why do you need it? So from a personal perspective, you've probably heard some variety of these stats before, but over 70% of Americans report from a Gallup poll saying that they're either actively disengaged or not engaged at work on a weekly basis. Millennials especially are burnt out. 3 out of 10 millennials talk about severe burnout at work. It's gotten so bad that the World Health Organization recently released a report in May calling burnout a global, worldwide phenomenon. So this is a clinical definition of folks not having efficacy, being depressed, not being able to perform their work tasks. The sabbatical can offer a reprieve from this. It can be restorative. You can be focused on things that are important to you and just kind of take a little bit of a break from everyday life. But also for your career. There's a concept in the research called the protean career. This means that you are in charge of your career. You have to acquire the skills to move on to the next level. You have to make sure you're ready to go and healthy and happy. Gone are the days where you show up to work from 9 to 5, your company takes care of your pension, your retirement, your health insurance, they train you, you move up the ladder, and you retire at 55. The average tenure of new employees at some of the most coveted firms here in Silicon Valley is less than 3 years. This suggests that you're going to have at least a dozen jobs over the course of your lifetime, which on the good side means you'll have lots of little pockets through which you can take time off. On the bad side, it's up to you to make sure that you're healthy and excited and invigorated for the next job, that you have the right skills, whether it's going to a coding boot camp or a product management training, to tackle that next job and the job after that job. It's on you. And you got to make time to spend with friends and families, recover your health, and just do things that are kind of fun and enjoyable. So that's why we need to take time off. But why is it good for you? So in our research, what we uncovered are 3 main benefits from taking time off. One, there's this identity work that happens when you are away from work. You're able to step back, get some perspective, and immerse yourself in something else that matters to you, which gives you perspective about your work and your life, but more importantly, yourself. Obviously, ourselves change over the course of our life, but we don't have this societal thing that we do to allow ourselves to view that change. Think about how you've changed, how you've adapted, and what that means for the future of your balance between work and life, or the type of work that you perform anyway. So that's quite important for that. Number 2, a lot of studies, especially the longitudinal grant study by Harvard, which studied men over the course of 75 years, showed that the greatest predictor of longevity and health and happiness in old age is the quality of one's relationships in middle age. And with such short amounts of vacation, it's hard to spend quality time with people we love and care for. I know my mom was always complaining because I'd come back for Thanksgiving and it was rushed and I'm checking my email and I have to leave and the flights are delayed. So when I was on sabbatical, I decided to take her on the trip that she's always wanted to go on, a train trip across Canada. And I can tell you there was absolutely nothing rushed or frantic about that experience. And finally, it gives people the tools for change. And those tools are confidence and lower risk aversion. By going off and doing something you've always wanted to do, whether it's a big physical challenge, attacking a trek that you didn't think you could accomplish, or just the act of stepping back from work and saying, you know what, that wasn't so bad, I actually survived and I'm better off because of it. That leaves people more confidence and an ability to tackle risks in the future that can allow them to change. Change is good. And so when we talk about what the objections are for people taking sabbaticals, we talked about it being, what will people think of me? Can I afford it? And what will I do with my dependents? Really, one of the key factors to allowing this to be part of our work life is companies, right? If this doesn't work for companies, then at the end of the day, it's going to be difficult to install in our society. But what the research suggests is there's actually a lot of benefits for companies. So think about it. Those employees are leaving. They're coming back more energized and engaged. And when you talk to business owners, they're often concerned that, well, if I give a sabbatical policy, it's basically an extended vacation, and my employees are going to leave anyway, and so I'm just paying for them to take a long vacation. What our data suggests is that out of all the people whose companies gave them sabbatical policies, 80% of them came back to the same job. They're coming back re-energized, re-engaged, which increases the amount of tenure that people have when they're at a company, which is good. And also they're telling people, hey, my company offered this fantastic benefit, which helps in recruiting and retention as well. But finally, as a company, it's a reality that people leave. It's also a reality, as I talked about with the stats earlier, that people aren't engaged at work sometimes. And so you want to practice that muscle of having your leaders leave, allowing junior employees to step in, have career stretching and career defining kind of roles and experiences, and being able to see how the organization works without that leader in place or without that person in middle management in place. That's helpful information, and if you can plan for it in advance, you can manage it and mitigate the risks. So back to companies, if companies are providing policies, and again, we had a large subset of the people we interviewed who had company-sponsored sabbatical policies. A recent survey by the Human Resource Societies suggests that 17% of companies across the United States have some sort of sabbatical policy, though only 4% are paid. If you have a sabbatical policy, all of a sudden the excuse about how is it going to look to employers and how can I afford it goes out the window. Even if you just provide health insurance benefits, that means that people don't have to worry about continuing care, and it's less stressful, and you can think about planning and saving up for that sabbatical over time to lessen the burden of the lack of pay. But finally, responsibilities and dependence. And this is where the research really was some of the most heartening stories. People who are spending 2 months in a box in an RV with 3 kids and their wife, saying it transformed their relationship with their kids, taking them from being, a set of responsibilities and soccer practices and arguments and complaints to actually knowing their personality and getting to know them as a human. How many times do we have the opportunity to do that? Or a lifelong consultant who, couldn't get a weekend away to hang out with his parents was able to take 2 months and take care of his ailing father as he died from cancer. And so how can we change this? How can we enact sabbaticals as a common theme across our work and life? I'd like to remind everyone that it's just been over 100 years when the 5-day work week was instated in 1908 in a factory in the United States because of our religious beliefs securing Saturdays and Sundays, and also labor unions fighting for 2 days off per week. This is relatively new. You've seen over the past few decades the fight for paid parental leave. The U.S. is one of the only developed countries in the world that doesn't legally mandate that. It's a fight that's still going on, but it's happening and improving. So how can we change this? What I suggest is we learned with the research the power of exemplars. So if you know someone that's taken an extended period of time off, you're much more likely to realize that you'll survive and it's actually great to do. So take time off, ask people if they've taken time off, and once you do, tell people about it. Number 2, if you're in the position at a company to be able to instate a policy, do so, because this will allow people all across the socioeconomic spectrum to take advantage of that, not just people with the most privilege. And if you work at a company and you're not sure that there's a sabbatical policy, check in the employment agreement. Oftentimes there's paid or unpaid leave programs that you can take advantage of. And then finally, what I'd ask you to do is just take that vision that you had at the beginning of the talk and just plant that seed and let yourself imagine that you can take just 1% of your work life off at some point. So please, take time off, tell people about it, and if you absolutely have to, call it a sabbatical. Thanks.